Yes, sir. We are live.
Okay. How many students are there totally?
There's one student, Gopal Ghosh.
Okay. So welcome all of you to the live session. This is the second of the series that we are doing, and this is the last week of your MOOC course. So hopefully I will touch upon with all of you tips for preparing for the exam and just sort of an overhaul of the course. So how many students have logged in?
So right now it is just one person who said hello.
Okay.
Gopal Ghosh.
Okay. Hello, all of you. So I would also like to introduce three of my TAs who are there: Chaitanya Kumar Matsa, Shaunak Roy, and Priya Nadkarni. These three TAs are also online along with me. So we will be taking your questions and we will be answering your questions. And for those questions which are detailed and involved, we can take them offline and we'll try to get back to you within 24 hours. So if you have any questions, voice them. And if we can solve it here, we can do it. Else we will take it offline. And then, these things will be, the answers will be posted within 24 hours. So I think we are coming towards the end of this course. This is the last week. This is the last week. So I think it would be interesting, worth to ponder about the course itself, right? So basically, we started off with the basics of linear algebra with vector spaces, etc., leading to the concept of signal geometry, which is very useful because we can define a signal space and then we can apply geometry on the signal space, and all the classification problems that we can think about, representation of signals, etc., can be very efficiently handled using this idea, particularly the signals within a linear framework. There is a linear vector space. Now, this was very useful for us, and then we were able to basically also appreciate how noise can be modeled as a random process, and then how we can fold those ideas back within the signal space itself, right? So noise and signal both can be modeled um, as basically points in the signal space. So where a deterministic signal can be an isolated point, noise can be basically a cloud around this point with a certain distribution. Geometry helps us in many of the problems in signal detection, etc., and useful for communication systems. So, and some of the problems that we talked about and during the problem solving session, particularly on the 4 QAM or 16 QAM, where we discussed this problem, which was basically having a very practical application. Then from there, I think we went on to module 2, where we extensively dealt with multi-rate systems. So we studied the sampling theorem to start with, and then reconstruction, and then the basic operations of decimation, then expansion, and then filtering, various combinations, whether we can downsample first, upsample first, and downsample, how can we interchange, then Nobel identities, polyphase decomposition for reduced order filtering, etc., etc. And from these ideas, we went into the two-channel quadrature mirror filter bank, discussed alias cancellation effects, the amplitude conditions to mitigate or minimize amplitude distortion, get rid of phase distortion, etc. Then we generalized to M-channel filter banks and saw many applications of these, right? And then we went to the notion of wavelet transformation, why we want to use wavelets, basically to bring in multi-resolution analysis, which is not the standard way the Fourier transform works, right? Bring in non-uniform resolution and attuned to the way we perceive natural speech. So we saw this the theory of wavelets unfold through a sequence of lectures, and I'm sure you would have done your homework exercises on wavelet expansion, then nulling out certain spikes, etc., etc. Which I mean, basically, once you do this decomposition, you can partition the signal into different subspaces, and you can null out an entire subspace. That's the whole idea, and then you can add, you can reconstruct back by adding the signals that are residing in the rest of the subspaces, right? And it's a very important, very powerful idea. Space. That's the whole idea, and then you can add, you can reconstruct. And then the other notion was convergence. We dealt into the mathematical subtleties of continuity, convergence of functions, and then we saw how this can be applied to the Fourier series. And particularly, we can't just take Fourier series for granted, because there are a lot of questions. If we have discontinuous functions or maybe finite number of discontinuities, can we get a good approximation? And because sine and cosine are basically periodic signals, they are continuous signals. And how can you represent a discontinuous, possibly having finite number of discontinuities in the signal using continuous functions? And these are the questions which have some delved into these within a series of lectures, in the which were covered in modules, I think 70, module 70 series, I think 70 series, 60, 70 series, 68, 67, 68, so on. And I think if you followed all the lecture notes, you should appreciate all the subtle ideas behind mathematical analysis as applied to signal processing. And then we looked at a data-dependent transformation, which is the KL transform, Cargan wave transform. I think this is the last. I think you're doing probably some exercises now. So this is a data-dependent transform, because you do the decomposition based upon eigenfilters. So that's the whole idea. So unlike Fourier transform or wavelet, which is data independent, in KL it is data dependent. This is a very important deviation. So and it's a linear transformation. It's data dependent, and basically your eigen decomposition can give you the KL transformation of your data. And then again, the whole idea towards compression, what components to retain, what to null out, that depends upon how much of energy is contained in each of these eigenfilters, and then basically you can reconstruct the signal back to the level of accuracy that you need. So I think the subtleties of the mathematical details are outlined in the lectures, so pay clear attention to the lectures and the definitions, because now summing all, we discussed the signal representation, to represent a signal as a point in a signal space, then sampling and its ramifications, then transformation, signal transformations, that is data independent, data dependent transformations, and then convergence, etc., related to Fourier series. So I think these four topics are major topics, are the core of this MOOC course. So you have done a 30-hour course, and I'm just summing this in 10 minutes. So this is what it is. But again, as people say, the devil is in the details. You have to go through every bit of the lecture modules if you have to get the grasp of the concepts. I urge you to do that again before your exams. Go through all the lecture modules, go through all the homework exercises and the solutions, and make sure that you have thoroughly understood the concept. And if wherever you made mistakes, that has been reflected in your homework scores that are 0 or 0. Look through the solutions in the homeworks, understand where you went wrong, and then basically grasp the idea, because your exam is going to be based um, on the cumulative material. So therefore, I think if you have gone through all the homeworks, understood the material within the modules, I think you'll be able to do well in the exam. So do not panic. Okay, so just go through the modules carefully, and you will be fine for the exams. But prepare well. So if you have any questions, we can take them.
So yeah, there are no questions posted yet.
Okay.
So yeah, I have one question. So we have studied Fourier series and let's say approximation and how it converges to the actual functions at points of discontinuities and continuities. So I mean, where do we practically use these Fourier series? Is there any practical application?
I think your entire spectrum analyzer is a good example for your an analysis. Okay. Right? You are getting a signal, maybe a radar signal with some, a certain frequency. Maybe you have a Doppler frequency also. You want to study the spectrum of this signal, because you want to sense the signal against something which is there, noise in the background. So your spectrum analyzer, whether it's tectonic based or whichever is your favorite spectrum analyzer, that is based upon this analysis, Fourier analysis. So this is one very practical application. And we automatically in our brain do some kind of Fourier analysis. I think we don't say this, but when you look at a natural image, we do low pass and we filter out first the intensities, we do the background processing, and then we look at details. So we do a level of spectrum analysis naturally. But I think a good example is spectrum analyzer. So that is one application of the Fourier principle. Sonar signals if you want to analyze, radar signals that you want to analyze, any signal that you want to analyze. The first thing is you basically look at the frequency spectrum and then figure out what the frequencies are. And depending upon the amplitude, you make your decisions based on those.
Okay, so is there any other way? I mean, for example, if we want to send a signal, I mean, can we use it for some kind of pulse shaping as well? So if we want to limit the
yes, absolutely. That's also another application where you want to study what kind of channel you want to shape the pulse to, because if you're shaping the pulse tuned to that channel, you're maximizing things, right? So therefore, I think to figure out how to shape the pulse, how good it is, you have to know the frequency response of the channel. So therefore, that's another application for channel characterization and pulse shaping that you can use. So people use this in you have this raised cosine signal and some of these other shapes, signal shapes. One can do that. But again, how good the signal is to get this feel in whatever it is in time domain, you may not be able to analyze. So that you get into the frequency domain and say how good the signal is, because you can figure out what frequencies it contains. This time sequence contains what kind of frequencies, and for that you need the Fourier analysis tool. And you study the properties of signal in that domain and then come back.
So, I mean, in the form that we have sent, 3 people have expressed interest in this live session. So, Dr. M.E. Prema,
okay,
Chirag Panchal, and Shahid Iqbal.
Okay, welcome
so
all
hope
of you. Yeah.
The 3 are present here, and
Okay.
I also see Gopal.
Hello, Gopal. This is okay? Yeah. Questions. This is a time where you can ask questions. Now, out of these 4, how many are taking the course for examination, etc.?
We are not sure.
We're not sure. Okay.
Yeah, totally 54 are taking the exam.
Okay.
How many people showing stream here? 10 viewers. Mine shows 5 viewers. What is it? Why watching?
Questions for the TAs on any of the works? I mean, this is the time you can ask. Feel completely free. I mean, do not have any inhibition. No question, a dumb question. I mean, it is dumb for the first time, but after the solution is revealed, it is not dumb anymore. So feel free to ask questions. It can be even parts of your homework. If you have any questions related to the homework, on a specific homework, specific problem, I think we can take it up now. And you guys have the homework sets, right, on your computers. So in case.
There is one mistake. That and that actually.
So as people joining in,
Yet.
yeah, we'll give them 5-10 minutes, and then if nobody's turned in, no questions, then I think we can.
So we can go until 5:30.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll give some time. So if they have questions, they can ask. If no questions come, then
Yeah, me too are also.
So also, I mean, here I see a large part of this course is representing the signals using various bases. So we started with signal spaces, then wavelets is also falls under the same category, and then Fourier series as well. I mean, are there any other? I mean, all of these bases, except for wavelets, we chose our basis, which is a different one. But all others are based on sine and cosine. So essentially, we are looking at time and frequency. So do we also look at some other properties of the signal? So one is here, a time domain signal can be represented as a frequency domain signal. But can we have some other property of the signal?
The wavelet, for example, right, is a non-frequency term. There are chirplets, there are wedgelets, all kinds of objects that you can choose as a basis. Right? It depends upon what is, you can represent the signal basically as an approximation, endow it with certain properties. But how good that property is, the frequency domain analysis can give us a tool. And so far, it's just been time and frequency. These are the two principal domains. So even if you're going in the wavelet domain, to figure out how good it is in the wavelet domain, you have to do the frequency domain analysis of the wavelet domain signal. That will give you an idea to relate everything together on the same plate. So you have Fourier signal, you do the Fourier transform, that is spectral analysis, you figure out how good it is, right? Then you do the wavelet and wavelet domain. But how good it is in the wavelet domain to get that objective, you have to again do a spectral analysis in the wavelet domain. That'll give you an idea. So I think this is the basic principle how signal representation is done. And what sort of signal coordinates we choose, sometimes you may choose different statistics of the signal and choose them as your signal dimensions. It's just left to the engineering application, how we find what to be relevant.
Okay. Yeah, we are still waiting for students to post questions.
Okay. Yeah, either they have understood everything or they're hesitant to ask questions. Or
people watching now, so
only 6 are watching.
including us.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is probably a general exam time.
Could be the case.
Busy.
Could be the case. We will sit for another 10 more minutes, and if there are no questions, we can end it early, and we can post them to send the questions offline, so the discussions can be collected, and we can get back to them with remarks.
So Abhyadeep has a question. He's
Okay.
an RF engineer and he's working on 4G technology.
Okay.
So he will post a question.
Sure. So by the way, I'm not familiar with the standards on 3G, 4G, 5G, etc. So if something is very specific, you have to pose it in the language of signal processing, and then we can talk.
So his question is this: what difference does a signal make when it radiates from E node B with all in one carriers? So I think, yeah, we probably require some more explanation on what this E node B is and what do you mean by everything going in one carrier?
Yeah, I think it can be very specific to a standard that he's asking, which can you go into the slightly into the technical details, and it'll become clear. Abhijit, can you be a little more specific in your question? In sense, can you go slightly into the technical details, what is happening there? Because we may not be familiar with these standards. So if you can go slightly, little more technical, what exactly is happening, then we can analyze that situation.
So he's elaborating on that. He has a site with 2100 and 700 megahertz bands.
2100
and 700 megahertz bands.
Two frequency bands. Okay.
and he has two antennas propagating signal from one site.
Mhm.
Essentially, that site is a radio.
Okay.
So we are waiting for further clarification. I mean,
Sure.
so Abhyadeep, could you pose the question on this particular situation?
So it's a single antenna which is combining these two signals and sending them out.
There are two separate antennas.
Okay. E ultra node B also known evolved node B. It's an element in E ultra. Specific to the
So
to the
Abhyadeep,
standard. I
is your question that two sites are transmitting on the same carrier and one receiver is receiving both the signals? Is that what you meant?
It's a broadcast question.
So he says that he has a site with, yeah, I think the question is this, as I explained.
okay.
So there are, he has a site with both 2100 and 700 megahertz bandwidth, and he has two
Carrier.
such sites.
Okay.
Uh,
Same frequencies.
Let's say if both the sites transmit on the same carrier frequency. So what difference does it make at the receiver side?
Because you're getting the same signal from both sides.
On same carrier frequency.
Same, but I think you'll have to have some identification to the information that you're sending on both the signals, right? I think that some header, some site identification has to be there. Otherwise, you don't want to mix these two signals, so sending them out to the same carrier, right?
He wanted to know the difference in signal propagation between these two scenarios.
You can intentionally introduce a signal delay. You can intentionally introduce a phase delay that you can estimate at the receiver, and from which you can you can decode, demodulate. And this is one of the ideas one can do, because if you are keeping them phase synchronized, then it would be hard. So is that in mind?
His other question was basically what could be the coverage difference?
Coverage in terms of the cell coverage.
In terms of the cell coverage, I guess.
No, I think this is another dimension that you have. Having the phase offset, you can play around. We can use the phase offset as an additional variable. Using several such phase offsets, you can basically cover the base more efficiently, provided you can pull back from your phase offset, right? So basically, you're sending several different signals, and basically it's delayed signaling protocol. This is one thing which I imagine. I'm pretty sure the standard may have its own way of handling it. But if you want to cover a cell using riding on the same carrier, but you want several signals, you can do delay difference. Essentially coding on the information. That should work. But as you know, that as long as your phase estimation is appropriate and not marred by random effects, you can as long as you can create a known phase difference and estimate this phase difference at the receiver, you can simultaneously demodulate and decode the information from the two carriers. That is one solution I can think at the top of my head, right? So this is possible, provided your phase doesn't wrap back. Okay, so he seems to be fine with it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, it was a good question, Abhyadeep. Thank you. It made us think on the spot. But I think implementing this would be interesting and challenging. I'm sure there are a lot of engineering technical details here. So Questions?
Yeah, so we are still waiting.
Okay.
Sometimes it's good.
Any more questions? Sure. Can ask questions.
So his question is, frequency is inversely proportional to a wavelength.
Okay.
So if the carrier L700 coverage is thrice that of 21 practically, what if we give 3 times power to the 21 hertz to match up to 700 megahertz coverage? Is that practically possible?
You want to give 3 times more power to the power allocation. I think
Is square of frequency, so it should probably be 9 times.
Yes.
But yeah, is that practically?
No, I think the power allocation should depend upon the. I think you have a certain channel in the channel response in the between the transmitter and the receiver. There is a certain channel response, right? So you allocate your response depending upon the channel behavior. So I would say, you have to do some kind of water pouring type of idea, right? I mean, given the shaping of the spectrum, right, the shaping of the channel, your allocation of power should be based upon that optimally.
I think
proportional to the bandwidth.
That would be when we are transmitting the same data over 2 bandwidths, right?
Correct.
But if we are transmitting the entire bandwidth on a particular carrier frequency, so I think his
right. I mean, he's saying just
question is
straightforward. I mean, basically, if you say it must be in proportion to f square.
Yes.
So therefore, is it practical to triple that? Right. I mean, that means if you're allocating more power, I mean, then also from information theoretic perspective, right? That means that particular channel has to be, it also has to depend upon the noise flow or noise properties across both of these two particular channels. I think I would do that study first and then allocate the power rather than just pump saying it is 3 times that. Right, because the noise, I mean, so therefore I have to look at the noise properties across both of these bands essentially, and then weigh the power appropriately according to f square. So the approach is problem.
So it is more on SNR conditions.
Yes,
rather
SNR
than,
conditions rather than just boost the power like that.
So also boosting power, it could also introduce non-linearities, right? Some of the
yeah, I mean,
hardware.
Particularly if you have interfering signals and you square them, I think it brings in non-linearities, and that has to be done by interference cancellation and the receiver. So that is, I think, a standard technique which people do. But before you allocate power at the transmitter, I would first study the SNR properties of the channel and then allocate the power based on that.
Okay. So what it means is if there is low noise in a particular carrier,
right.
Even with the low power transmission,
yes, exactly,
actually be able
yes, yes. If that is your objective, to maximize your transmission rate.
He says this would further degrade our SINR then, right, sir? It should actually improve, right? If we boost the power.
Exactly. Power should, as long as you keep the interference noise ratio the same, you boost the transmit power, it should increase the SINR.
Okay. So what it means is, let's say if both the carriers have equal noise floor,
yes,
then probably 9 times would give a similar channel condition.
Yes.
But let's say if the noise channel is actually lower,
right,
we probably don't need to boost 9 times.
Yes,
It could be just some 5 or 6 times, depending on the noise level.
Yes. So basically, you have the interference condition, you have the noise conditions in your denominator, and the numerator you have the transmit power. So we will weigh according to how your numerator and your denominator variables balance out. That's how I would do, rather than just pump in straight 9 times the transmit power. That I wouldn't do that. Does this answer your question, Abhyadeep? Okay. He seems to be fine with it. So we have 20 minutes more. So how many are logged in?
About 6 right now.
Okay. We had 23 last time, right? I think 20 plus last time.
It's even notified, right? In the computer notified. announcement was made. Probably their exams. No, this is exam campaign. Could be exams.
So Abhidip, did you go through the modules? You found them helpful? Just for our feedback here, since the 6 people, I think I can ask you this question from this side. Have you are one of the registrants, I suppose? Have you registered for the exam as well? Have you gone through all the modules and did you find them useful? And if so, please share your thoughts and as again your comments and feedback on the lecture modules would be very useful for us. Do you have a question? Do we give about 5 minutes more?
Yes.
And then we'll try to wrap it by 4:50. But if there are any people logging in late, I think we can give them the benefit of doubt. But if we see that it is DC, the 6 people and people have asked questions, then I think we can stop it early.
I post in the forum.
Sure. Yeah. It could be also the exam week for many students.
It is
That
exam
is
week.
probably
I see
likely.
at least it's there. It could be for other institutes.
That's why we are seeing them less. But people in the industry, people who are registrants from the industry, they can post.
So I have one hypothetical question.
Yes.
So if we look at filter banks
Hmm.
that we have studied, it seems somewhat like a multi-input, multi-output system.
Mhm.
So we have multiple streams that are being transmitted and
Right.
multiple streams. So based on that, let's say I have a particular signal transmitted on a particular carrier frequency, and what I want to do is I want to have 2 receiver antennas, one both operating at half the sample rate.
Mhm.
So does that help in some sense?
So you're saying you have 2 different, let's say you have filter bank and 2 different branches are sending two different
No,
frequencies
let's say just one signal is being sent,
on one branch, downsample. Okay.
but the receiver has two receivers. I mean, two antennas receiving.
Yeah, I think it's diversity detection, right?
It
That
could
should
be
help. Yeah, it
diversity.
should. Yes, it should help you, because you may receive two signals, and from both of these you can do information. So therefore, it is diversity detection, and that will help you. That will help you get your
so there is small difference that I see with respect to the diversity detection. So diversity detection, as I understand, we actually receive the signal at the same sampling rate as the transmission.
Correct.
It is happening. But let's say here the two streams, if they operate at half the transmission rate.
Doesn't matter as long as the information is contained.
Okay.
At your do your down decimated, if you are as long as your information is contained within subject to your constraint, then you're fine with.
Okay.
That's the most important thing.
So probably the idea is if they are operating at half the sampling rate, the power consumption could come down.
Could come down as well, but as long as your information, you're sampled, you can't downsample at a rate which violates the sampling idea, right? As long as the sum rates from your downsamplers add up to your original sampling rate, it is fine. And in that process, the information that you're sending from each of them, as long as you can get diversity detection, it is good.
Okay. So probably we should have some kind of filter before hand if we want to upload than the Nyquist sheet.
Yes.
Something like filter banks.
Yes. Yeah, I think we have a couple of minutes. If nobody is posting any question, I think we can just wrap it up. We have a time for one quick question, if at all we have. And then we'll try to wrap this session up because of lack of participants. Just post it. Then no questions?
No.
Okay. So it looks like we are, but those of you who may be listening to these discussions later on, wish you good luck. Hope you enjoyed the course. Please provide your feedback, give your likes and comments on the YouTube portal. This will be very useful for us for our next steps, right? And if you have any questions for this week, you can ask, you can post them, and then we'll be very happy to answer your queries. And wish you good luck for the exam season, and also wish you all the best for your other endeavors, and hope this course was useful to you for your knowledge base. Okay, we can stop this.